Here we are again.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
How many people do you have in your studio today, Adam? Because last time you had 51, and I made sure to have 52.
Well, I invited Metro Salt Lake out today, and Winston, my dog, showed up. So,
Okay. I mean, that's a crowd, I guess.
All right, guys, welcome to episode whatever number we're on of the RamblinFly podcast. Thanks so much for joining in. How are we doing? First and foremost, let's get an update with you and Tim. What's been happening? Where are we at with Apple?
We did not get episode 5 on Apple. I'm hoping to have episode 6 on Apple Podcasts.
Oh.
Tim told me he has an assistant that does all of his work. So I've been barking up the wrong tree.
I mean, when you're that kind of rich and famous, I mean, you'd probably have an employee. I could see that.
Yeah, just one though. That's all. But no, I actually am pretty close. I got to the correct service department, and now I'm waiting on them to fix one thing on my account.
Okay, well, we could still find them on the Google and the Spotify's, though, correct?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, guys, today we wanted to bring on one of our buddies who is a saltwater extraordinaire and really kind of get a deep dive going and get you guys some beginner tips on red fishing. So today we have with us Pete from Corpus Christi, and who runs the Skiff Wanderer channel. Make sure you check down below. You'll have links to all of Pete's fun stuff with his YouTube videos and his Instagram. But we definitely appreciate you joining us and talking to us about red fishing.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, you guys. Been listening for a long time, so it feels like an honor to join you guys.
Are you a long-time listener but a first-time caller?
First-time caller, yeah, definitely.
Hey, guys, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Great. Well, so Pete lives, as we just said, in Corpus. He has a really great YouTube channel where he puts out a lot of instructional stuff, some cool stuff. Make sure you check him out and follow him. His Instagram's got a lot of cool stuff on it as well. But Pete's really been growing a lot in the saltwater market and wants to kind of start transitioning into some travel stuff, some kind of booking some guiding stuff as well. So anyways, a lot of cool stuff coming up from Pete in the next year, huh?
Yeah, no, we got this year. I'm hoping to make it out of the country, but still haven't finalized anything with that. And then got a couple bigger trips planned that I'm pretty pumped about. Some camping, and then some just checking out some new locations. I'm supposed to leave on Monday. I don't know when this will come out, but I'm supposed to leave pretty soon to go over to Florida, spend a few days chasing some big redfish over there, and then hopefully find myself some snook and some tarpon.
Snarping.
What's
snarping fishing?
That's awesome. Vocab word of the day, snarping.
Yeah. That's
cool. Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate you penciling us into your busy schedule. But as we said, Pete does a lot of cool stuff down in Texas. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the conservation that's going on, what's kind of current events in Texas coast and saltwater world right now. And then after we kind of tell you about maybe some of the stuff going on there, we also wanted to bust into some of the top red fishing tips that we have. So when you guys finally decide to book your first red fishing trip, or maybe you've been a couple times and you just want to get a little more proficient, Pete was nice enough to put together 5 tips for us for kind of what to look for and kind of gear, flies. We're going to cover a little bit of everything for you. So anyways, Pete, you want to take it away, kind of tell us what's happening on the Texas coast?
Yeah, so kind of a couple of things right now. One is the sea trout bag limit is getting changed, or there's a proposal to change it. I was able to go to one of the hearings the other day, which I don't know if you guys have ever had a chance to go to a public hearing in regards to basically any kind of legislature that's getting changed. But if you haven't, you definitely should. It's pretty cool to see the whole process. So basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to lower the bag limit to leave more breeding stock in the water. We had a really bad freeze last year and killed a lot of fish, a lot of the sea trout. So they're just trying to bring the breeding stock numbers back up in the next couple of years. I think that late February or March is when the final rule will get presented to the commissioners, and we'll hear something on that. The way the rule's set up, I think, is really cool, though. It's actually got an expiration date, and then the rule will go back from a bag limit of 3 sea trout back to 5. And if at the time Texas Parks and Wildlife feels like it needs to stay implemented, they're gonna they have to go through the whole process. So there'll be hearings again, and which I think is pretty cool that it's not a permanent change, and then in order to make it more permanent, it's got to go through public hearings, and everybody will have a chance to kind of give their input on their thoughts with what the bag limit should be and how it's affecting things.
Yeah. So I remember from that freeze when I went down there, it's pretty interesting to see like the mangroves were pretty much there was a lot of dead, grass, a lot of the like stuff that's out there in the bays and in the kind of in the backwater. A lot of it was dead. It was a pretty interesting sight.
It's been weird all summer. You'll be out there in shorts and in a t-shirt, and you look out over the marsh, and it looks like it's late fall or even winter time. And I can tell you right now with the mangroves, I've been seeing around me. I've been seeing a lot of them starting to come back. We are supposed to hit some freezing conditions tonight, potentially. So I think the long-term forecast is calling for another big freeze on the Texas coast. So fingers crossed that we avoid that, and we can start seeing our mangroves come back and our fish population start bouncing back really good.
For sure.
Luckily, the redfish have held strong through it. All the ones that we've been catching have big bellies, nice size. So I don't think they got hit quite as hard as the sea trout. So it's been.
Do you know if it's frozen much in the past? Like maybe the past 10 years, how often it freezes?
The last big freeze where they had to take action was 1983.
So that's a long while ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dang. So how often do you fish for sea trout? I mean, obviously a lot of people would think that might be like a spin fish kind of thing down there. But I mean, do you target sea trout much with a fly?
Not as much as I should. This time of year would probably be a really good time to go out and start targeting them. I get too excited about redfish. And so there's a little bit of an overlap, but generally where I'm looking for redfish, it's not really good habitat for sea trout.
Yeah.
But I've seen some really nice ones. Kind of when we get to the edge of flats, you have a good chance of seeing them. Normally when I do see them, I've got the wrong fly. So that's always good, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
Standard practice.
They're definitely fun to catch. I've caught them on a fly, but I'm the same with you. Anytime I'm in redfish country, I kind of put blinders on and kind of just focus on their heads.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool. And so I also heard there was some stuff going on with the like oyster bed population, some conservation stuff there. Do you know kind of what's happening?
Yeah, so that's kind of the bigger issue, and there's actually, what's today? The 26th. There's going to be a hearing on some of that in the legislature about changing some of the laws of that. So basically, what's been going on is the way that commercial fishermen harvest oysters along the Texas coast is they use a method where they basically dredge the bottom, and what happens is over time you keep doing that, you're pulling the reef up with it. So that reef is basically dead oyster shells, and then the new oysters will come and they attach themselves to the reefs, and they can takes decades to build them up to the levels that they were previously at.
Right.
A lot of the stories I've heard is some of these reefs, you used to be able to wade fish, and now you're about chest deep in water when you're trying to wade fish them. So it's just not sustainable. And then the next big issue kind of with that is none of the oyster shells really making it back to the reefs. So they're constantly getting depleted. I could probably speak for way too long, but
Mm-hmm.
some of the changes is that are in motion and being proposed are to limit the number, or to segregate the reefs into commercial reefs, and then sanctuary reefs, to try to save some of those, because basically these reefs, they're major ecosystem. They support a ton of wildlife, a ton of in the water, and also like birds.
Yeah.
And so as we lose them, we're losing a lot of habitat for our fisheries. I think, right, if I'm going to hopefully get the numbers right, but so that average an acre of oyster reef, when it gets harvested by these oystermen, it's going to bring about $800 in. And that same oyster reef, the environmental impact can be anywhere from $4,000 to $20,000 is what it's valued at, depending on where it is in relation to the shoreline. And then when you look at a recreational impact, that number is around 23,000 again. So,
wow.
From a monetary standpoint, we got to save them.
Yeah.
And then also, it's a really good buffer for the mainland from any kind of tidal surge, swell coming across. So, it's just the reasons to save them are just way too high. Texas finally, I think last year, allowed mariculture, so basically oyster farming, to take place. There's 2 farms, one up in Galveston and one down in this area in Copano Bay. Everybody's listening and they want to check out, that one in Copano Bay is actually managed by the Water Street Oyster Bar. So those guys, they go through about 600,000 oysters a year, and they realized they needed to try to do a more sustainable job of providing oysters. So they went out, fought hard, got permission to farm, and then they have I think they've got the first permit or the second permit, and they've got oysters in the water growing right now. If you want to see some cool stuff on Instagram, you should check out their page, because they're constantly giving updates on how it's going. I think that page is like the Texas Oyster Farm, but it's some pretty cool stuff to see. So there's some really good stuff being proposed right now. One of the things that's going to get brought up on January 26th is closing down I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to try Mesquite, Ayers, and nope, I messed it up. And there's another bay. So basically, these are smaller bays, and they're going to close them down permanently to oyster harvest, which, though, the bigger bays, obviously they can handle a little more pressure, but
right,
the smaller bays, they can't. And so as what we've been seeing on the coast is as these bays get closed down, because the oystermen are reconcentrating. So the new areas that are still left open, you'll see 400 plus boats on a single oyster reef, and it just within weeks, they'll go through all the limit size oyster to where that area then gets closed down, and it takes once it gets deemed that it can be closed down, it normally takes a week or so before that closure actually goes into effect. So those guys are still fishing it. Yeah, and just to give you kind of a yeah, it's not good, but there's a lot of good stuff on the horizon. A huge number of groups of organizations have come together and written a proposal that is being heard, and it's been presented to the commissioners. And like I said, I think January 26th, there's going to be a hearing in Austin to hopefully ratify everything into law. Some of those organizations, if you don't mind me just listing off a few, that if anybody wants to check them out, CCA Texas, Flatsworthy Texas, which I am a member of, Galveston Bay Foundation. Those are the 3 that I can really name really well off the top of my head. Texas Backcountry Hunters and Anglers also. So everybody on the coast basically is trying to. We don't want to see the oyster harvest go away, but we want to see it done sustainably and done the right way. Which is if you read through any of the proposals, that's what everybody's gearing towards. Isn't trying to take away these guys' business, but trying to make sure that 50 years from now we've got oyster reefs to fish.
Well, I am curious. I know with both of those things, probably most of the people listening to the podcast, I mean, obviously your points were great no matter what, but how much pushback is there from either like the oyster guys or like the conventional spin fishermen, like we mentioned with the terminal tackle stuff that, those guys that are keeping a bunch of sea trout every day? What's the pushback or a lot of people on the same side, or kind of how is that down there?
I can't really speak to I don't really have a lot of insight with the commercial pushback. I could speculate that there is some.
Yeah.
Kind of what I've been keyed in on is the pushback is mariculture will never work in Texas, which is one of those like kind of, for me it's like, well, it works in every other state that they do it. Why wouldn't it work here? I really think that once these farms that are in place start producing and everybody sees the benefit of it, it's gonna change the game a lot, and you'll see a lot more of those oyster farms pop up. In terms of like recreational, we're pretty much across the board. We're all on the same side of we want to see it done sustainably.
Sure. Well, I've also heard. I don't have any exact examples. I should have looked it up, but I know like in the Northeast somewhere I saw they were putting out like big concrete kind of like a artificial reef for them to kind of grab onto, or like I know there was also some stuff where they were growing them in they'd have these big concrete blocks in like a tank. They'd get the oysters to go ahead and start kind of attaching themselves to it, and then they'd move them from the tank out into the bays. Is there anything like that?
So right now, that is one of the things that Texas still needs is a hatchery, basically, for growing our own locally oysters that are kind of raised more in this environment. Right now, the oyster farms are allowed to bring in oysters from other states. There is a deadline. I couldn't tell you what it is. So we're hopefully by the time that we reach that deadline, we'll have a hatchery in place to take care of those local farms, and then also a lot of those hatchery oysters will go back onto public reefs to help them out as well.
Cool. Well,
right on. You did an episode on your podcast not long ago about this, right? A little bit deeper of a dive.
Yeah. So I did an episode. I sat down with Shane Bonneau. He's the advocacy director for CCA Texas, and I know he does some stuff with National, and he did an amazing job of we talked about oyster issues in the U.S. We talked about the life cycle oysters, the value put on oysters, and then went into way more in depth into a lot of the solutions that have been proposed. Yeah, definitely. If you guys want a really good listen, that is an awesome. I think it's an awesome podcast. I mean, I did it. So,
check out the.
But if you wanna listen, Shane is he. So a little bit quick background with Shane. Shane, he actually got his master's studying oysters in mariculture, and then spent some time up at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, VIMS, and he helped with the Virginia oyster program in the Chesapeake and Delaware Bay systems, which I think early 2000s they basically reached a breaking point up there, and they're now 20 years later they're just starting to really see everything come back to where it was. So, I mean, that kind of also gives you a timeline for how long it takes to right this mistake that we've got.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, here's a little link to the podcast. If you want to go check out the oyster stuff, go ahead and hop over there, listen to that. Adam, I think you were saying something.
Yeah. Go check that out if you want to deep dive into the oyster stuff for sure. Pete knows his stuff, and his podcast is pretty great as well. So go do that. Well,
yeah, do it.
Y'all want to move on to something a little more fun? Not that that wasn't fun, but I don't know. It was
I appreciate you guys.
It was a little down. It was it was a little touch and go there. I almost cried once or twice, and I'd rather move on to something a little more fun if that's okay with you guys. So Pete is a master, incredible redfish angler, but so he put together a couple tips for us. We wanted to go through, like if you're still pretty new to red fishing, if you've never even been red fishing before, kind of what to expect, what you could practice. But Pete put together a great little list for us that we wanted to kind of just run through, get you guys loaded up with some ammo for the next time you go red fishing.
Yeah. I think also another group that this might benefit is, and a lot of these tips I got from watching someone that's on the podcast right now. But if you spend a lot of time trout fishing, just kind of some of the differences and some of the stuff that I see. I've been blessed with fishing with some guys that are really fishy and spend a lot of time on fishing trout in freshwater. So I think these tips also will hopefully help with some of that.
Yeah.
Me to just go.
Yeah. Let's just start with number one. What you got?
Number one. All right. So number one, first tip that I've got, let me get my sheet. I printed it off. Casting. So when it comes to casting, and before I get too deep, I can tell you right now, my experience with freshwater is, I did it about a long time ago and I haven't really done it since. So feel free to kind of, tell me when I'm saying something that doesn't make sense.
We may fill a couple gaps in. We'll see.
So one of the big things that I see is guys will sit there and they'll pull their fly line to where they've only got like a foot or two of fly line out the end of the rod. And so one of the things that I suggest with casting, and there'll be a few in here, is leave at least 9 feet of fly line out the tip of your line. If you look at the taper on most fly lines, that's right when you start to get into the weighted section of that fly line. And what that's going to do is that's going to limit, about 3 false casts that you have to take to get that first, because when you guys know when you're casting, that trying to get that first 10, 15 feet out the tip of your line, it can take a minute. So you get that first 9 feet out and it just automatically puts you in a really good spot to be a lot faster. Fishing redfish, it's a game of seconds from the time someone spots it to when you can get that cast in front of to when the fish is gone. The next thing is when you're practicing, when you're getting ready, preparing yourself. The number that I was told was 2 false casts, 80 feet of line out. If you're shooting at 80-foot fish 80 feet away, they're really spooky, and they're probably still going to be spooky even when that lands. So what I would say is 50 feet. You want 2 false casts, and you want to be able to put 50 feet out accurately. Again, game a second. So the quicker you can get fly line out, the better. And that's gonna tie into knowing how to double haul, which is super important. Not just for getting line out fast, but also kind of the next point with that is having a short game. Adam, you've been down here. Brent, I don't know how much redfish you've been able to chase, but you guys know like half the time they pop up 15 to 30 feet from the boat.
Yep.
And if you've got that 9 foot of fly line out, you've already got 1 false cast and you've got the line out you need. And if you can double haul really well, I've learned that gives you a lot more control with getting that line getting that fly to a fish quickly, even when you're trying to make a short cast.
I mean, and the good thing about everything you've just said is that that's all stuff you can do at your house before you ever go. I mean, that's backyard. I mean, that's casting, a few times a week, just practicing that stuff, either out in the street, in the backyard, or at a local park or something. I mean, that's everybody could access a spot that you could practice that.
And go ahead.
Yeah. Since we're talking about casting in the yard or, at the park, just make sure when you are practicing your casting, put some kind of fly on that's weighted similar to what you're going to use, because the rod and line are going to act much different with a large dumbbell eye on the end of it versus just a little piece of fuzz.
Yeah, so for sure.
And one of the things that I actually do when I was trying to nail down the fundamentals of double hauling and then even a short game, a couple of like practice things. One is use a lighter fly rod. Use a 4-weight, use a 5-weight. You don't need to break out your 8-weight to practice double hauling. It's going to be a lot easier on your arm, especially when you're just trying to learn fundamentals. It's not, break out the 8-weight. Definitely, so you get used to the feel of the rod, but don't be afraid to practice all this stuff with a lighter rod.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I still want to try this. One of the things when you're practicing, if you've got a buddy, what you can do is get a group of tennis balls and then have them stand behind you and then just chuck those tennis balls, and that kind of gets you ready for getting that cast down quick.
Now, I don't have any friends. Do you have any?
My dog just chases the tennis balls, so it's useless.
You can't do that one in the backyard.
No, I gotta. She goes crazy whenever I break out. If I was moving fly rods the other day and she started going crazy. I was like, no, we're not gonna go.
We're not going fishing. Sorry.
But then, so with accuracy, one of the things that I also see is people they'll try to put that fly, right on top of the fish, which probably 90% of the time that fish is he's going to be in the next county as soon as that fly lands. Generally what I try to do is 2 feet past and 2 feet in front. You kind of have to get a feel for how the fish is swimming and lead them like you would if you're duck hunting. And then what you want to do is with that fly is basically you're trying to paint one of these on his face. You're trying to get right underneath his nose to where he doesn't even have to think about, he doesn't have to try to chase it or anything. It's an easy meal for him pretty much.
Yeah, that's.
I think one thing that took me a while to understand is I was always trying to cast the fly right in their path. I wanted the fly to land right in the path. But what I didn't realize is when you land the fly, it sinks and drags closer to the boat. So when you say cast 2 feet past the fish, that's probably to allow it to swing down into their swimming line.
Yeah. That helps with that, definitely. And then honestly, it kind of ties into point number 2 with a little bit, which is talking about fly selection. So the other reason is you want that fly to look like whatever bait, whether it's shrimp, crabs, minnow, that it's imitating, so you want it to have that swimming motion that mimics whatever fly you're using at the time. So yeah, I guess we just roll right into fly selection.
Yeah. On that, the biggest thing that it took quite a while for me to get down is it's more 3D than what a lot of people would do, because it's not only do you have, you got to get it in front of the fish, but then you got to take into account the depth, which I know we're about to talk about, but like with your cast, being able to, kind of adjust quickly to where you're going to cast. Obviously it's really great to be able to pick out a spot, and land a fly, on a dinner plate or something at 50 feet. But do you have any like casting drills for us to like, because honestly for me, that was a hard one. If you're laser focused on trying to land a fly here, honestly for me, when you get to the salt, that's if that's what you practice, that's what you're going to end up doing. So do you have any casting drills for that?
Not one of the things. I mean, this is just off the cuff, but one of the things you probably could do is if you're doing like that tennis ball drill, have your buddy call out like, oh, he's swimming right, oh, he's swimming left, so that you get used to landing it, on to his left or to his right.
Yeah.
Or you could even say he's swimming at you, he's swimming away, and just so you practice, landing it a little bit in the area, but not on top of them.
Yeah, I think that's super important because if you're, if you practice all the time hitting the plate or hitting the, the tennis ball, then when you get out there and your buddy's yelling at you from the back of the boat and you're hyped up and you just saw your first red, chances are I think you'd botch that cast because you'd land it right on his face.
I can tell you I'm really good at that.
Oh, I might be the best at that.
Well, we'll have to see.
But anyways, yeah, no, that's to me, that was one of the biggest things is that I'd spent all my time, especially streamer fishing on rivers or whatever, like, okay, here's this log. I want to hit that log, or, especially if you're, like we said, there's a fish, maybe eating in a current and you're going to cast a dry up in front of it, casting it, getting it kind of set and then floating into the fish versus, it's definitely kind of flips it to something you've never really done, which is where you see the fish come in, it's, on a trajectory path and you're trying to figure out how to get your fly in front of it. So,
yeah. And picking up, like if you're casting, that first shot's going to be 50 feet and then maybe the fish moves from 12 o'clock to 10 o'clock, you might have to pick up a 40-foot cast, turn it 20 degrees to the side and make a 40-foot cast. So practice picking up a lot of line and laying it back out instead of stripping all the way back in and then restarting your cast from that 9-foot. Because it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get multiple shots on the same fish and still be able to strip all your line in and restart your cast.
Yeah.
And that's definitely where having a good double haul it helps out a lot, is picking up a large amount of fly line.
Right. Cool. Well, I know you kind of mentioned it. You alluded to it. You want to go on to the number 2 fly selection?
Fly selection.
How to pick a fly?
We kind of use this saying. I don't know if you guys heard it. Match the hatch. I don't know if you guys do that at all.
I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
So basically, what that is you look at like what's in the area at the time, and you base what you're going to use for a fly off that. Sometimes you have to turn over. No, wait, that's freshwater fishing. We turn over rocks. No, so
hold on. That I don't use that because mostly all I ever use is just something big, chartreuse, and like
nymphs.
No.
Eggs.
Yeah,
just uses
it's just eggs.
all year.
Well, but they eat eggs all the time. Doesn't matter if there's eggs in the river or not.
Yeah. So basically, kind of having it's one of those where I don't know the word for it, but you see a lot of freshwater guys that get really deep into studying
entomology.
Yeah, that's the word.
There you go. Vocab word of the day.
So the
number 2.
So kind of the same thing. Understanding what bait is prevalent at the time, and then a lot of that, you can kind of look at the life cycle of different minnows. You can look at the life cycle of crabs. You can look at life cycle shrimp to get an idea of when, the smaller ones are going to be more prevalent on the flats. But it also helps to get out there and, when you first get on a flat and that first 10 minutes of poling, pay attention to what bait you're seeing. Are you seeing crabs? Are you seeing shrimp? Are you seeing bait or minnows? And you might have to make a quick fly adjustment right off the cuff with that. So yeah.
So if I'm on vacation with my family and I decide I'm going to go wade a flat and go fish for a day, how can I tell what shrimp or crabs are out there? Like, I always see them scampering off, but I can't ever figure out like, oh, this thing's this color or whatever. Is there any tricks to that?
So one of the things that you could do is that I highly recommend is stop by the local fly shop, talk to those guys about what's working in the area at the time. The fly shops, saltwater fly shops, I think they're a lot like kind of everything I've heard about freshwater fly shops. Those guys love fly fishing. They love talking about fly fishing. They love helping everybody out. So stop by, talk to them, tell them, kind of what you're doing. You might get some areas to go check out. You might get a better idea of what flies are working or not working. And then when it comes to coloration, generally what I'll do is I start out with just basic natural colors, a lot of tans, and then base my color selection more off the water clarity than off of looking exactly like, a specific crab or a specific shrimp. Because generally, like if there's shrimp, you're going to find a variety of shrimp on a flat. You're not going to find just, this is the white shrimp flat, so we got to make sure we're using white shrimp. You'll find a little bit of everything mixed in. Especially when we start fishing crabs and shrimp, a lot of the patterns we use can be mistaken for both. I should have brought a fly box in so I could show you guys some. But a lot of the flies that we'll use, 1 minute it can kind of look like a shrimp swimming through the water. It could kind of look like a crab swimming through the water. If you let it sink to the bottom, it'll look like a crab trying to stand his ground. But then as soon as you move it, it goes back to looking like something swimming. So a lot of stuff we use are like seducer patterns or toad patterns where they got a really big body hackle and then a nice tail out the back. And then like when I'm tying seducers up, I'll generally kind of make the tail split so that when it sits down on the bottom, those two ends of the tail will kind of separate away from each other. And I mean, it doesn't look exactly like crab claws, but if a fish is moving quick, you might mistake it enough to get an eat off of it.
Well, I definitely needed all of that information because I only tie on one fly, and I only ever need to fish the Mobile leprechaun. I don't need to do all that.
Well, I got one sitting right next to me.
That's all. I mean, but the funny thing is, talking to you about that, Pete, is not any different than on a trout river or a bass river, whatever. I mean, that's just not that it's not a great tip. It is a great tip, but I think it's interesting that how universally important that tip is.
So I think what plays more into it that from my kind of what I've seen though is how you work the fly, which I think is way more important. If you get a decent looking fly, but you're stripping it in wrong, he's not going to care about it.
Right.
You could have the perfect fly. So generally, like what I would suggest with that is kind of study how a shrimp moves, study how a crab moves. A crab's going to pick up off the bottom. He's going to make one giant jump through the water and he's going to land back down. So if we're working crab patterns, we let them set on the bottom and we pick them up and we move them. And let them set on the bottom and then we pick them up and we move them. If you're fishing in an area that's more predominantly the fish are going after minnows, you're going to want those short ticks to keep that fly constantly swimming.
Yeah.
A lot of the flats that we're fishing here, we're fishing more shrimp and crab patterns. So it's a long, slow strip to kind of give it the right movement. Sure. And that's one of the things I've seen with guys even coming over from Florida where they're used to fishing more minnow concentrated areas. They'll start ticking like that and the redfish here don't like it. So definitely pay attention to what the predominant bait or food source is, and then how that food source moves through the water, and make sure you're moving your fly in that correct manner.
And how important is like reading the fish combined with that? Because obviously you can study and know how a crab or a shrimp moves, but sometimes the fish will make a move or it'll turn and you might do something that's not natural for a crab that'll grab their attention again. How do you begin to read the fish's actions and translate that into moving the fly?
Missing a lot of fish.
Doing it wrong a lot.
Doing it wrong a lot. Yeah. Honestly, like that's one of those that it just takes time on the water and time watching them. Generally, one of the biggest things that I'll see is anglers, they'll stop moving the fly or they'll change how they're stripping it. And that's going to be a big turn off to a redfish. Crab that's running away isn't just going to suddenly stop and sit in the middle of the water column.
Right.
A minnow swimming away isn't going to suddenly stop and turn around and decide he's going to hold his ground.
That's one tough minnow.
The other thing that you'll see a lot though is you'll see the redfish. They'll come up and they'll kind of take a sniff at the fly. They'll give it a really good hard look. And if you see something like that, I'd say change the fly. Yeah. That's not the fly for the day. A lot of times we'll run into that issue when it's a lot calmer or the water's super clear. And that's when we'll start breaking out flies that, like mesh. We'll have to start breaking out like mesh crabs and stuff that look really realistic, because those fish are just, they're on edge. They're being hypercritical of how you tied your fly. So if you see them stop and they take a really good hard sniff, then yeah, that's not the fly for the day.
You get the refusal, keep moving.
Yeah. One
of the things for me that I've run into a lot when picking flies for saltwater stuff, and especially was pretty interesting is going to fish with Pete in Texas, is the weight of the fly is to me one of the biggest things for picking the right fly.
I think that's what I give you the most shit for.
Yeah, you do, because I want to use heavy flies. I like fishing stuff that it makes it. I mean, I'm trying to cheat, but it makes it a little easier because you don't have to calculate as the drop as much. The time that it takes to drop in the water column. There's less calculations if you use a heavier fly, but it's going to hit the water a little harder. It's might going to sink down in the sand or the grass a little more than a lighter fly would. You want to? I know you've got it on here. You want to talk about like weights a little bit and kind of what you like?
So, one of the first things that I'll do when I pull up to a flat is either I or whoever I got on the bow. One of the things you can do is just drop the fly in the water and then just do a count to how long it takes to get to the bottom. And then, if you get into that like 3+ second range, it's probably going to take too long, and it's good to go with something a little heavier.
Well, and especially the deeper water too. On the flip side, they're not as spooky about having a heavier fly land.
Right, yeah, because they're generally, if they're down a little bit, then you can be a little more aggressive in your approach to them. A lot of where I like to go, without giving everything away, is going to be a lot shallower. Generally, see the skiff I'm running will float in about 4 inches of water. So anywhere from 4 inches to foot and a half of water is generally where I try to target. So a lot of what I try to use is a lot lighter. When you're looking at weights, like Adam was saying, you want it to be able to get down to the fish in a timely manner without spooking the fish. So you also have to kind of take into a little bit environmental factors. If it's a crystal clear, calm day, they're going to pick up on that fly hitting the water. If they're super aggressive, that's a good thing because they'll start looking for it. A lot of times you get into tailing fish, and so this is something I think is kind of cool. So when you get into tailing fish with weights, you can go a little bit more aggressive. So what that redfish is doing is he's scared that crab or shrimp down into the grass. And he's basically just tearing it up in there, rooting around, trying to find that food source. And a lot of times what happens is that food source will actually throw it up in the air and not realize it. So a lot of times that noise of that fly hitting the water can key him in like, oh, that shrimp's over here. So you'll see him pick up and start looking for it. But the big thing with fly weight, especially shallow water, is, you don't want it to get in the grass. Fish is going to have a lot harder time seeing that fly if it's down in the grass. So you want to make sure that your fly is staying right on top of the grass. Sometimes even weightless is too heavy for some of the stuff that we like to get into, especially in the summer when the grass is a lot higher. You might be in 6 inches of water with 4-5 inches of grass on top of it, so you just can't use a lot of weight. So it really depends on the situation as to how much weight to go with or not go with. I would definitely recommend, if you're picking up flies from a fly shop, talk to the guys about what the water level's doing, and then don't be afraid to pick up a few different weight sizes.
I think that's one thing that really doesn't really exist in the trout world or the streamer world or really any of the freshwater world, which is you go to a fly shop and you have a fly with, it's the exact same fly, the same size, the same color, the same everything, but it's 2 to 3 weights, weightless, shallow or heavy. And that's definitely
Adam, you're skipping out on the Euro nymphing that they're starting to make different bead sizes on the same Euro flies. I'm very surprised you don't know this.
I'm so done with you. How do I get someone off a podcast here? Well, okay, whatever the Euro nymphs are doing, I don't really follow that, but I know a lot of redfish patterns, kind of follow that. You might have one to 3 different weights of the exact same fly, and I'd make sure that I have, especially flies that are working, I would buy one of every weight. But Pete, I guess if you just put ourselves in the shoes of someone who's super new, maybe you've never even caught a redfish before, what would you say? Would you err on the side of heavy or would you err on the side of light? Like
light.
Yeah.
So and when I say light, I'm speaking to Texas. But generally, if you're fishing, light is the way to go. Weightless, have a good selection of weightless. Have a good selection of bead chain eyes, and then if you're looking at flies, if you get into lead eyes, I don't use anything bigger than medium, and I only tie a few of those. Most of what I tie with lead eyes is going to be extra small or small. Right now, the lead eyes are making too much noise on the water, though. Like for Texas,
Pete likes small flies. I've been tying flies for Pete, and every freaking fly I send him, he's like, no, too heavy, too heavy,
too heavy, too big,
too big, too heavy. But yeah, so if you just walked out on the flat, probably the first thing, if you didn't really know, if you didn't know what was going on, the first thing you'd probably tie on is something maybe a little smaller with bead chains.
Yeah,
is that about right?
I would tie if I was going out. Normally, where I start with is something that's about like 3 inches, 3-4 inches long. It's got a big body hackle, and it's got a good tail out the back. And then bead chain eyes definitely is a good place to start, and just see how they react. If you land that bead chain eyes fly, and the fish spooks off to the next county, probably too heavy.
There you have it.
It's crazy how different it is than down in New Orleans area, huh?
Yeah. Those fish are so dumb. I love those fish. New Orleans fish are like, oh, there's a boat. Let me go say hi.
They're drunk, so.
I
bet they have food.
That's the other thing too with fly selection is kind of like keying in on the area. So like Texas, the fish here, smaller flies, lighter flies. You go to Louisiana, when I fish there, we're fishing like 5-6 inch seducers with medium lead eyes and just these god awful giant things. And
but generally,
the face and they're loving it.
But generally, when you're there, you're probably fishing deeper water, or at least if nothing else, the water is probably super dirty, though, right?
Super dirty, yeah. And that's another thing. Honestly, I haven't really touched on with fly selection is water clarity. As your water gets murked up, definitely start switching to darker colors, your olive colors and your black colors, and don't be afraid to go a little bit bigger just to make so that fly has a larger profile in the water. And sometimes if the fish are being super spooky, being in a little bit dirty water helps out. So definitely, a lot of where I start is gonna, if you came on the skiff tomorrow and you're like, what are we gonna start with? It's gonna be something that's tan and small. But as we get into it, don't be afraid to get into some darker flies.
I like it.
Gotcha.
Well,
we're already going a little bit long here, so I think we should take point number 3, which is basically how to find the redfish.
Yeah.
And let's just put that down to go to the local fly shop or hire a guide.
Yeah.
And see what happens, and maybe move on to a little bit of the approach once we've found the fish or have a general idea where they are?
Yeah, so this is another thing that I actually see. You get guys that are used to fishing trout rivers or where it's a little bit louder. You don't, out here we don't have the running water noises to kind of hide us. So definitely, like when you're in the zone, whisper, not really, but enough that the guy can hear. I've watched redfish spook just from going, "Oh my God," and then they're gone. So watch your voice levels. Don't slam coolers. Be gentle when you're walking around the boat. One of the things, especially when you're practicing your casting with that, is I recommend if you've got like a 35 or a 45 Yeti, stand on top of it so you can work on your balance. Because as a lot of times you can see, is guys will really get their whole body into a cast, and that'll actually rock the boat. And you'll see the kind of the pressure wave that's sent out from that will actually spook the fish as well. So you want to try not to rock the boat. You want to try to stay quiet. And then, what else do I have on here? I think it's an interesting point. Try to hide the boat. If you're pulling a skiff, if you've got like a little grass island, don't be afraid to tuck and he's on the far side, don't go around the island, stay on the back side and make the cast over the island to where he can't see the boat. Crystal clear water, they can see the boat, they know you're there. So just try to hide a little bit if you can.
What about like walking techniques if you are waiting on them?
If they're in the area, slow down. So what I'll do if I'm wade fishing is I'll move kind of a little bit quicker, but if I know I'm making an approach, kind of that same mentality. If you're trying to sneak up on a deer, you spot him, then just start slowing down because, you're not going to send out as big of a wake ahead of you as a skiff is, but you're still going to push water in front of you. And then the same thing, if there's a way you can hide yourself from the fish, if you can get behind a clump of grass or something where he can't really see you approaching, it's a good idea as well. And that's one of the things with walking, highly recommend if the fish are being super spooky, you're seeing a bunch of them, park the boat and get out. I think Adam, when you were down here, you and me and B, we saw some fish. They were being spooky. We parked the skiff and we got out and we started catching them again. Yep.
Yeah, especially if you get in that zone and you are in a boat, get out of the boat. If they're too far out, they're being that spooky, just go find them on foot.
Yeah, which kind of, if we keep rolling, kind of ties into gear a little bit. The next kind of group of tips, I definitely get you a pair of wading boots, keep them with you. I always keep a pair in the skiff just in case I need to jump out, whether we get a little too skinny or, that's the best way to approach the fish that day.
Do you like those, like the saltwater wading boots, like the neoprene ones with the little zippers or whatever?
No, I don't like those.
Okay.
Not a fan.
Great.
Sims flat sneakers.
The flat 100%. Sneaker.
Yeah. I actually think they're really fashionable and you could probably wear them out in town.
Pro tip.
So
may or may not have worn those to a restaurant before.
Exactly. But honestly, like, when I was in high school, we would just take an old pair of tennis shoes, cut the mesh out, and that would be our wading boots. Just so don't feel like you got to go drop $150, $200 on a pair of boots, or else you can't go wade fishing. Don't be afraid to just, get an old pair of sneakers and chop them up.
I do still think that's better than like sandals or whatever.
Yeah,
because you get the shells and stuff up underneath your feet, and then you can't get them out. And
yeah. And then some other gear tips that you should have: polarized sunglasses, 100%, hands down. If you don't have them, actually carry a backup pair on the boat in case somebody loses a pair or forgets theirs, just because it's basically game over if you lose. If you don't have polarized sunglasses.
Do you carry different color lenses, or do you carry the exact same color?
No, I've got two different colors on the boat. One for more overcast, and one for sunny. I was actually the other day I couldn't spot any fish. I was having a really tough time, and my buddy Zach kept finding fish. And I was, what the heck is going on? So I switched sunglasses, and I could see him a lot better. So, yeah, if you're gonna buy a second pair, don't get the same lenses.
Yeah, in a game like saltwater stuff, I mean, I would have absolutely, if you have a boat bag that you're carrying with you. Obviously, if you're on foot, it might be a little different. But if you got a boat bag, I would have 2 pairs of sunglasses that have different color lenses.
Yeah, it's
yep.
Yeah. And then
that might be the one tip consistent through everyone we've talked to is like, Adam, you carry an extra pair of glasses in your boat. Jake did, and now Pete is. Like, that's probably the number one thing that's been consistent.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you can't see them, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then actually, I don't have this on the list, but one of the things with and I know I've been giving Adam a hard time on this one. Those hoodie sun shirts.
Oh
God. I highly recommend the hoodies. One of the things and the reason being is this also ties into a hat with a really good bill on it, is because the sunglasses are great, but you're still gonna have openings in the side or coming in through the top. So like when I'm wearing my sunglasses, I'll try to get them as close to the bill of the hat so there's no light coming in there, and then that hoodie can help seal off those sides a little bit, so you don't have any extra light coming in that will reflect off the lens. It's really important in kind of the earlier late hours when the sun's at weird angles to kind of try to block some of that sunlight from getting in.
Have you thought about just going over to Harbor Freight buying a welder's mask? Because that would block out, you got the whole thing, and then next time.
I might have to look.
We need to invent some new sunglasses.
Next time I'm down there,
might be a new video right there.
Oh my gosh, we need to do that. Pop the thing out, so you just have the little.
Maybe we can get Costa or somebody to build a welder's mask.
Oh my gosh!
With
all right, I'm on it.
In it.
I'm on it. Coming soon to a fly shop near you.
The next thing with gear that I think is important is when you get into fly line and tapers a little bit. There's a lot of companies out that make redfish taper lines, which generally those tapers are going to be more. First of all, before I get too far into this, you're looking for a floating line. All right, you don't need to get into sinking. I mean, you're generally, like, if you're fishing deep, it's 3 feet of water, so you don't need a sinking line. Float line is the way to go. And then when it comes to tapers, I know that there's a ton of redfish tapers out there, and there's guys that have a lot of success with them. I tend to lean towards a bonefish taper. It's still going to have really good weight up front, but it's going to be a lot lighter landing on the water, so you don't get that kind of slap that a fly line can make on the water, just to kind of keep you a little more stealthy. But that's definitely something, if you're in a fly shop, talk to them about. Again, I don't know how much of that is personal preference versus, hands down only way to do it. Definitely how I like to do it. Yeah.
But I guess so generally, generally for line tapers, obviously you just said bonefish versus, you don't like the redfish labeled lines as much. What is it about the tapers? Maybe because I know there's a bunch of other kind of tapers, like the universal. Some folks nowadays aren't putting a fish name on it. That's like the Power or the Universal, or I don't know. There's a lot of different fly lines out there that call them a lot of different things. What kind of like taper shape or are you really looking for?
So what I like to see is that first like 15 feet is a lot narrower, and then you get kind of into your heavier section. It would be, whether it be normally there, it's anywhere from 15 to 20 foot of a heavier section that then tapers off towards the back. That way, if you're making the big cast, the power, the weight's there to make the longer cast. You've still got enough weight up forward to where when you're making those 20 to 30 foot casts, you're going to have the power that you need to make them. But those small, oh no, my light died.
Oh my God.
My light might be dead. My light's dead. So generally, when you have the slightly smaller taper up forward, it's going to land a lot lighter on the water. And when you're dealing with spooky fish, it's one less kind of thing that you got to worry about spooking them out of the area.
Yeah.
I've started messing with clear tip lines, which I'm a fan of. If you're a beginner, I would just ignore those until you've got some experience casting, because it can be a little bit harder to see that last 10 foot of fly line. But if you're a little more advanced or you've been casting for a little while, it definitely gives you a little bit more of a stealthy approach when you're going into these redfish. It's one less thing that they're going to be able to easily see go in front of their face.
So that makes sense. So like just the longer front tapers, because you just want that lighter approach, where I do feel like, at least in your area, they are probably a little spookier than others. But I do think most people's redfish tapers are probably a little heavier weighted at the front to really punch bigger crabs and stuff. But
yeah,
sounds like those just don't land quite light enough for what you're doing.
No,
definitely. And you guys in Texas sound like you're fishing smaller flies, so you can get away with a lighter front taper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the New Orleans crowd, they definitely want a more aggressive taper to help turn over bigger, heavier flies, where you're more about a delicate presentation with smaller flies where you don't have to worry about the turnover as much.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I fished Louisiana, we've gone straight to those redfish tapers. And I mean, because a lot of times there, you want something that you can punch really quick, punch into the wind. So having that weight, and the fish don't care. They're just happy, they're happy to see you. So
yeah.
So it doesn't bother them.
So last thing on that, I know we get bazillions of questions about tippet and leaders as well. What kind of leader do you generally use?
So I'll build a lot of my own leaders, and if you're going to build your own leaders, look at the fly line diameter at the end, and then what I'll do is I'll compare that to the diameter of mono for my butt section on my leaders. And generally an 8-weight fly line, the end of the line is going to match up to a 40-pound mono. So the way I'll build them from there is I'll do 40, 30, 20. The 40 and the 30 will be mono, and then the 20, the tippet section will be fluoro, so that you get that little bit of a sink without too much sink. And then generally length, I'm looking at a 9-foot leader, and then 5'4", so 5 foot, 4 foot, 3 foot, which I think the math doesn't work out there, does it?
That puts you around 12.
That's a 4.32.
It'd take me a minute. Hold on.
That's my 12-foot leader.
Yeah,
when they get
right.
Carry the one.
So
that
again.
I like that tip. What about, is there a so for the folks who are listening that might be a little more beginner than that, if they run in their local shop or whatever, they're going to place an order online before they go. Sounds like you said the last piece of your leader was 20 that you built, right?
Yeah, I'll either do 20 or 16.
So would you? So for folks who maybe aren't quite at leader building yet, I mean, just a full fluorocarbon tapered leader from any reputable brand that's 9-foot fluorocarbon down to 20-pound, or labeled as a 20-pound or like a 16-pound leader. Mm-hmm. Is that?
Yep, that'd be the way to go. And then what I would recommend is two things. One, the plastic bag that it comes in, save that, because when you start building leaders, those things are awesome for throwing your leaders into. And then two, as you put different flies on and you start cutting away at that tippet section, I'll go in and tie a new tippet right on the end of those. So you can just learn your blood knot. It's a good way to practice your blood knots. Tie another, 2 foot of 16 or 20 pound tippet right onto the end of that thing, and you're good to go again.
For some of those guys listening, I know Pete, you don't know anything about this. The trout guys normally some people use a blood knot, but the like double surgeons or double overhand knot, I would not use that on a saltwater application. Learn to do a blood knot. If you are going to tie tippet onto a leader in a saltwater application, use a blood knot.
And then, also like I've used double unis. When I still didn't trust my blood knots, that's what I was tying, was double unis.
Yep.
Which most of the guys, most guys know how to tie a uni knot. It's just tying 2 uni knots to tie your line together. So
yeah,
I think that helps.
Your Instagram has a lot of instructional knot videos.
Yeah.
So they're super easy to watch, and go check that out if you're trying to learn some different knots.
I've definitely referenced those myself.
You're like, oh, hold on.
Hold on. How do I do this again?
Man, I hope I have that saved in my photos from where I uploaded it so that I can get service out here to rewatch that.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
And then, all right, we'll talk reels a little bit. 100% seal drag. I know you guys are way more. I think you guys can speak more into the technicals of drags than I can in reels, but seal drag, large arbor reels. That's what you want. You want something that can pick up fly line quick. You don't want to have to worry about salt eating away at your drag. So
true.
Adam, do you have anything to say about that?
I like the cork.
It's too much work.
It is. It's more work. It's more work. It's not as easy. But I'm more into the cork because I do go places that I've never had to really do anything to a cork reel, but I feel that if I was in the middle of nowhere, I could still jerry rig a cork reel versus if my seal drag ever does mess up. Not that I've ever had that happen either, but if the seal drag did mess up, there's nothing I could do about it. So I don't know. It's a little peace of mind, but you're not wrong. If the seal drag is the way to go, if it's, if you're just trying to buy a good saltwater reel, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I like the cork ones though.
And then I think the last topic, which is rods, which for me down here, so Corpus,
Eagle Claw mostly says that.
Yeah.
Fenwick.
Have you guys heard of Fluger Shimano?
I don't know. Never heard of that. The ugly stick, is that
Stick, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's got a clear tip, so it's extra stealthy.
Extra stealth.
So we're Texas coast. You're looking at 207 days out of the year, 15 plus knots of wind. So that factors greatly into rod selection. I like a big, or not big, but I like a stiff, fast rod. When I'm casting, something that that can punch through the wind, so you can make that 30-foot upwind cast if you have to. Yeah.
There we go.
So I'll dip my toes into this one a little bit, just because.
Here we go.
Here we
Yeah,
go.
Here we
go.
Big reason.
Can you
was having this.
Are we gonna? Is this coming back out?
Yeah, we're getting back into I still haven't got my mini fly rod. I was having this conversation with a fly shop employee not too long ago, and it sounds like it might be a relevant conversation for Texas. He was worried that he is fishing for permit. So he was worried that if he got too fast of a rod, then it would be almost impossible to make a lighter, softer, delicate presentation. And we went down there's kind of two paths to this. So do you pick a medium action rod that gives you the easier delicate presentation and fight the wind with more casting skill? His argument was that if I pick a medium action rod, then I can set the fly down lighter in calm conditions, but he thinks he's good enough at double hauling that he can make the medium action rod get through the wind.
Oh, is he?
I'm just kidding. I mean, sure. There's a lot of good casters out there, and you're still not talking about dumping a whole fly line. You're talking about a 40-foot shot.
Yeah.
But my argument was, I would rather have the fast action rod because it helps you get through the wind. And if you want to keep the loop tight as you're getting line out, it's much easier to do that with a fast action rod. And when you want to open the loop up on that final payoff pitch, the delivery cast, then you just finish a little lower and open the loop up. And then you can still get that delicate presentation. Obviously you said you like fast action rods, but have you messed around much with different medium versus fast?
So the first rod that I really, when I started really getting into saltwater, was more medium action. It was a TFO Lefty Cray edition 9-weight, and I was still really learning to cast, and I've messed with it a little bit since then. And definitely, if you're going to go medium weight, practice. Since then, like I said, most stuff I go with fast. And so one of the things that I would say kind of to that is any coastal area, you're going to end up potentially dealing with sea breezes. So even if you wake up and it's glass calm and it's beautiful by 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to have a sea breeze roll in. So that wind's going to show up at some point during the day. So what you might lose, that's gentler presentation, which I think, like you said, you can definitely practice making that softer, that fly land a little bit softer. You could look at potentially using a lighter fly to get that softer presentation, because eventually that wind will roll into the area. It's a coastal thing. It's going to happen, and you're going to want that fast action rod at that point.
That makes sense.
If you're practicing with the medium weight and you've got it down, go for it. Most of the guys that I fish with, we all like faster rods. Because even a glass calm day, by the end of the day, we're looking at 15 knots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's possible to make a fast action rod have a delicate presentation. It's not possible to add power to a medium action rod.
Yeah.
No.
So if you're only going to bring one,
do the fast for sure.
Yeah. Because I can tell you, like, when I've tried with that TFO rod, I've tried to punch it like I will some of the faster rods I use, like, it just falls apart every time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Yeah. Sweet.
There we have it.
Well, I think that was a pretty good dive into red fishing. Pete, thank you. That was I definitely learned something, and hopefully all our viewers are learning a little bit as well and getting stoked to go chase some redfish down on the coast.
I am.
Definitely, you guys that are watching this, you need to seriously put like that Corpus area. I mean, there's a bunch of good red fisheries all right there around, kind of Corpus, Houston. There's a lot of cool places to stay. Flights are generally pretty cheap throughout the entire country. There's a couple really big airports around there you can fly into. Places to stay are pretty cheap. I mean, they're big enough places that they've got normal hotels and that kind of stuff. And I personally think that there's more fish there throughout the year than anywhere else. I mean, to me, if you want to go catch a redfish, that I think that you should go to the Texas coast. If that's what your goal, that's where I would go. So do that with what you will, but
I'd say anybody traveling down here, there are a ton of great guides that know how to work with. If you're not as experienced with saltwater, there's a ton of great guides that know how to work with you to make sure and put you on that redfish. Because I can tell you, I think that video that Scotty and Bryant did where they came down here kind of alludes to it. Like, it's a whole different animal. Definitely some tips, that we've talked about, but it's a whole different animal. A good day for us is 2 or 3 fish in the boat.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, if you're coming down, manage your expectations. And I'd definitely recommend hooking up with one of the local guides and having them take you out and show you around too.
Yeah, even if you're trying to ball on a budget, you don't have the money to, get a guide every day. At least pull your money with a buddy, go in on a guide for the first day, and then wade
the rest of the trip, at least jumpstart, those flies, what kind of, water you're looking for, things like that would be huge.
Yeah. And one other thing, don't get scared. Like hearing that you might only boat 1 or 2 fish a day might be a little discouraging. I promise you those 1 or 2 fish will be so much more exciting than a 30 trout day. Yeah. It is so worth it. Yeah. Just give it a try.
Yes. You got to go do it.
Got to.
Well, Pete, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate you coming along for the ride. Hopefully we didn't bore you too bad with our antics. I don't know. But thanks so much for everyone who followed along. Again, Brent and Tim, I think, have a tea time next week. So they're going to try to hopefully really dial in, getting us on Apple. I don't know what their problem is with us, but we probably violate some rules or community guidelines. But Google, for some reason, let us on, and so did Spotify. So if you're interested in checking out that, also, we're going to have all the links to some of the things we talked about. We'll have a couple of Pete's pictures, some bio stuff, picture of his boat, so you can kind of see what he's talking about. You can see that on YouTube if you're watching this on, or if you're listening to this on Spotify or Google. Hop over to the Blue Line Co., and then there's a whole playlist of the RamblinFly podcast where you can see those as well. If you would like us to cover a topic or have a question for us, hop over, shoot us a DM, shoot us an email, or I don't know, whatever. Go see Brent at the community center down in Denver. I don't know. Go down to Corpus and find Pete. He's there every day on his boat at one of the boat ramps. So run over there and talk to those guys. You'll see me Euro nymphing out somewhere, and come talk to me, and ask us a question like, what are you doing and why are you Euro nymphing? Would be great. Anyways, but we really appreciate you guys following along, and we've got some continuations planned, but would love to get some comments, some questions from you guys, and some topics that you'd like to see covered for our coming episodes. So there you have it.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.